All right, so welcome to the Talk Roundtable. Talk stands for Talent Acquisition Leadership Keynotes. The goal of the organization is to elevate, enable, and empower the TA function across the globe. So hopefully we're achieving that. Today, we're going to talk about interviewing in a remote environment. And we've got an awesome guest host today, Edisa Rodriguez. I see, then I screwed up the Rodriguez part, right? From Pillar. So I'm really excited to have her speak about this. I think this is a really interesting conversation, so I'm excited for that. But again, while we have people signing in, let me just give a little tour of Talk, the platform. So let's go back to that. Okay, so if you log into talktalent.com, if you're new and you just got an email and you signed up for the event, we're more than just events. Come onto the platform. There's a full social network surrounding the TA topics. So come in, you'll see all the hot topics in the forums. Some recent polls that have been posted, some events that you can attend, and then you can drill down into each of those. Obviously, you can go in and look at each of the events that we have posted. We usually have at least a month or more scheduled, but I'm going on vacation. So we got a few less posted now, but keep checking back. We'll have a bunch more posted shortly. Then you can go into the forums. There's always a lot of chatter in here. You can definitely, it's a great place to get your questions answered. And I highly encourage you to pay it forward and answer some other folks' questions. Really helps the community, keep going here. And, when you have a question 6 months from now, you're going to want folks that are, eager to answer. So, again, pay it forward, come in here and, share your knowledge. And then we've got polls, which are awesome. Great place to benchmark some data on some stuff you're thinking about. We have over 10,000 members, mostly in North America, but a few across the globe. And this is a great way to ask your peers, hey, what are you doing on this particular topic? And then you've got a member directory, so you can come in here, you can sort by location, industry, company size. You can really find some folks that share your exact challenges and strike up a conversation. Go to chat, connect with them on LinkedIn. There's a great way to, again, connect with your peers and get some of your, get some feedback. And then we've got a couple of vendor categories. There's a vendor directory and there is an agency directory. So vendors and agencies are not necessarily members in the traditional sense, like talent acquisition and HR folks are. They're not in on the forums, they're not in on these events, but they are here as a resource for you to, come and check out their information, reach out to them. So, we have over 4,000 agencies in here now with ratings, again, from your peers. And the vendor directory, is here. If you're looking for a new ATS, you can click into the ATS category, see how people are reviewing, different vendors. So definitely check it out. And again, the more information you guys put on here, the better. If there was 100 reviews on Greenhouse, that would be better for when people are looking for that in the future. So, put in 5 minutes and come in here and rate and review some vendors, and that'll help the entire community. Okay, so enough of me talking. I think most people have signed in. I'm just going to kick it over to Edisa. So I'm going to stop sharing. And all right. Whenever you're ready, you can take over.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Let me just jump in here and I'll start sharing my screen, make sure that everything's all set up. Let's see. We're good here. Okay, great. All right. Well, hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here and to get to spend this afternoon with you all, diving into a topic that is very close to my heart. First, I wanted to say a big thank you to Norm and to the entire Talk team for inviting me to speak here today. I'm really excited about this platform and the space that you guys have created. And I'm eager to just kind of, have this be sort of the beginning of a relationship between our teams going forward. So as I think Norm mentioned, I lead Growth DEI for Pillar. We are an interview intelligence platform that is driving innovation in the evaluation and selection space, and in particular in the interviewing space. What that means is that we're focused on helping you run better interviews that are more efficient, more effective, and more equitable. My background is a bit windy. I won't dive into it. I've been working for 20 years, and so that'll take the entire time. But I started my career in consulting and finance. Right before joining the Pillar team, I ran my own recruiting firm that focused on diverse hiring. As I was building my company, I ran into a roadblock over and over again. My team of recruiters were sending great candidates to our clients, and they were rejected. They were getting rejected, and my clients never really knew why. The data and information that they gathered was generally like more anecdotal, high level. It wasn't as detailed as I would have imagined. And the lack of transparency in the interview process became really obvious to me. I decided to join the Pillar team primarily because that's the space that we live in. Interviewing to me is like the next frontier when it comes to really improving and upskilling and driving forward in improvements within the hiring process. It has historically been a black box, and we're here to help to open up that black box, make your jobs easier, and get you to hire the best. So very pumped to dive into this hour with you. I'm going to really quickly, just high level, kind of do a sort of an agenda-ish of the topics that we will cover together today. Let's kick it off with number one that we'll dive into is how remote work has shaped the interview process. So most of that you guys will already know, and it'll be sort of preaching to the choir, but good to kind of level set together there. Then we'll cover the trends that are shaping the way that we connect with potential candidates. A little bit of this is going to be very much deep diving into the technology that's supporting some of the things that we already know that we want to do, but don't necessarily have the technology to make it happen. And in this stage, with AI coming into a sort of a new space and a new level and driving a lot of innovation and technology, I think this is a good place for us to kind of come together on, all right, here are the goals that most of us probably already have. How is the new technology that's coming into play going to support us in actually achieving that? And then the third thing that we'll dive into is some of the best practices that have emerged in the virtual realm of interviewing. We'll dive into a few of them some that are relatively new to a lot of teams, and so I'm excited to get to that. Before I dive into the topics, I want to put out a couple of housekeeping notes. I love an interactive session, so please jump in and ask any questions that you can. I think that, Norm, correct me if I'm wrong, you can just raise your hand using the Zoom icon at the bottom, or feel free to drop your questions into the chat. We have my colleague Alexa in the background who will be monitoring questions and making sure that I get to them and helping me kind of ensure that you guys get to jump in here and join the conversation. You'll also see us pop in some audience questions from time to time, so don't be shy about jumping in and sharing your experience. It'll just make this conversation much better. I've also grabbed my coffee, I have my water, I have all my things, so grab your things and let's get comfortable and get into it. All right, so with that, let's kick it off with just a high-level view of sort of the biggest sort of the evolution that we have seen over the last few years within interviewing, and the why we are here to have this discussion today and all that innovation that has happened. Most of this you guys already know. About 3 years ago, with the obvious biggest changes that came post-pandemic, we really shifted from a face-to-face model to a virtual model when it comes to interviewing. We've shifted over the last 3 years, in particular, from moving from a lot of non-technology driven interviewing to technology driven interviewing, and new sort of directions have emerged over that time, right? So we went to work from home, we have a more remote environment, we saw the impact of BLM, which was already shaping a lot of the way that we were hiring long before it became this national platform that really impacted the way that we think about hiring. There's the war for talent. There's all sort of the things that you guys have already been dealing with and grappling with as a TA community that have shaped the changes that are coming when it comes to interviewing and what the future holds, in particular as we think about what a hybrid model will be and the way in which technology actually shape our interviewing in the future. We have seen this across many organizations. Most organizations that we talk to today are currently figuring out whether or not they'll move from a remote, from their fully remote interviewing into a hybrid model, or how to kind of navigate that. How can technology actually support you in doing that effectively? How is it going to impact the way that you guys hire and the talent that you have available to you, and how you evaluate that talent? And so we'll dive into each of these today, but really just kind of want to level set on the direction that we've gone in. Before I jump into the trends that we're seeing, I'd love to get you guys sharing a bit. So we're going to pop in an audience question. I actually have no idea how this works. Does it just pop up on the screen, Norm? Or do I ask it?
Looks like Alexa put it in the chat.
Oh, great. Okay, great. Thank you.
So for anybody that can't see the chat, it's, would anyone be willing to share how your organization moved from in-person to virtual interviews, and what your key learnings were? So Edisa, do you want people to just call that out? Because people are not polite with me. They don't raise their hands. I encourage people to scream out. So if you want that.
Oh, please. Yeah. Let's do that. That's great. I'll stop sharing so we can all see each other's faces for a minute. Would anyone be willing to share how your organization moved from in-person to virtual interviews and what your key learnings were?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. I'm Chris Costa. I'm a senior recruiter with A&E Networks. And I had started with the company 3 months prior to pandemic. And our model was the in-person interview, first round, second round in person with multiple people, maybe a third round with multiple people, and getting the rooms booked and all that kind of stuff. And we're in New York City, so obviously making people travel in was a hardship. And we went to full remote after March 20th or whatever it was, and have kept that. Some managers are pushing back now, asking for in person, and we're saying no, absolutely not. So I think the main learning we had was made life a lot easier. I think it made things a little fairer too, because we didn't have the whole, I met him and I didn't really like his handshake, or he didn't have eye contact with me in the meeting, in the 6 different people that met, right? So we kind of got away from that panel interview with multiple people in a room. And we even got rid of it from a virtual perspective too, of not having people, 3, 4 people, on a Teams. So it made the process a lot more efficient and a lot faster, actually, in my view, because obviously doing phone interviews and virtual interviews and not having that travel nightmare made things a lot easier and a lot faster.
Anybody here who's seen, Chris, I appreciate you sharing that. Anybody here who's seen the opposite happen, where teams are eager to go back to in-person interviewing? All right, I have Chris in the chat jumping in and saying that their managers love the idea of doing virtual interviews post-COVID and haven't changed. We have Chris sharing that worked for companies that always had a virtual element to interviews. COVID forced mainly virtual interviews. We're already using the tech. Teams interviews are now able to happen quicker because interviews don't have to happen consecutively. It saves money for everybody and travel. Agreed, 100%. All right, well, let's jump into our first trend. Chris, thank you so much for sharing. All right, so what we'll start today is around insights-based hiring and how the technology is enabling us to think about this differently. We are no longer, really running interviews in a black box. There's an opportunity to capture more insights throughout the interview now that they've gone into a virtual space. The days of trusting your gut or hiring because you liked a candidate, or really not having a lot of data or information to back up your decision making are really behind us. The best candidate may not be the obvious candidate. So the more data that we have had to inform, that we have to inform the interview process, the stronger we are seeing interviews shape up. And while this has been a trend in general over time, the way that AI is allowing for better insights today is by creating a more consistent interview process for teams where there's more transparency. To dive into a little bit of something that we'll talk about later is that many teams are now recording their interviews. They're using these recordings to surface information and capture information that they otherwise wouldn't have captured. And I'll dive into that as a best practice later, but it'll help to kind of shape this conversation a bit if I share that now, so that it can be clear how we're able to get a lot of these insights. With recorded interviews, teams are able to faster evaluate candidates. They're able to capture more information and share that information. Even data as simple as is my team asking the questions that I'm expecting them to ask? Are we completing our scorecards as quickly as we could? AI is really helping to make that faster and more efficient. We're seeing teams that are now better able to calibrate the ways in which they evaluate a candidate for skills and the questions that they're asking. So Chris, to your point around, having panel interviews where you have multiple stakeholders, now with interview intelligence and with AI involved in the process, you can involve, more stakeholders into your journey without actually dragging a candidate into the process, because they can actually listen to highlights, listen to clips from an interview, and share that with their team ahead of an interview. For example, we've seen teams that are able to now take that information and share it with senior leadership, so that senior leadership can opine. They don't have to chase schedule a senior interview. It's allowing multiple stakeholders to jump in. And so what you're seeing is that teams are armed with better information, and I'll dive into this in a minute, but they're armed with better information on the candidate, the interview, and how those interviews actually were shaped out, and what information they were able to get from those interviews. They're also able to use that information to better train their teams, which I'll speak to in a minute as well. For our second trend, I'll jump in here as well. We are actually, I'll ask in the chat if you guys can share how many interview rounds the majority of your candidates go through. And what I typically hear is that it's 4 to 5, right? It's like the sort of golden 3 to 4. Some teams I'll hear are still in the world of running, 8 interviews and putting in the candidates through a really long process. But most of us have kind of come to the realization, to the point within our organizations where we know that fewer interviews is the direction to go into. But what I want to talk about today is that fewer is one direction and better is another sort of clear trend that is emerging in the space. We've all talked about. I'm checking to see. Yeah, I'm seeing the 2 to 3 in the chat. 3 to 4, 2 occasionally, 2 to 3. So we're seeing. Is that high volume, Jillian and Cheryl and Chris? Where you guys are seeing 2? If you won't mind sharing in the chat, or sharing here in the conversation, if those are high volume, that'd be great. High volume is 1. Okay, so not high volume, still 2 to 3, even for not high volume. Great. Most of our jobs are 2 or 3, technical engineering and admin. Great. So really fewer is great. Better is even better, right? So we're going to talk about what it means to use this technology to really take a view of what better really means. Now that means to us, especially within interview intelligence and how teams are using this, it means that, you're not repeating the same questions over and over again. So your candidate has a much more streamlined experience. Everyone is well aligned in their journey for what their specific questions are and what focus areas they're going to be focusing on. When we're sharing highlights from an interview, from interviewer to interviewer, they are better prepared for the candidate when they jump into a conversation. And so this is where I like to share kind of my own experience interviewing. using interview intelligence. So it was obviously interviewing with Pillar, but it could have been any organization that's using interview intelligence. For me, by the end of my three rounds, I met with our CEO, and he knew my husband's name. He knew that he was deployed with the Army. He knew my dog's name, and he knew almost every detail that I had already shared with the team. And he was able to do that with like a 10-minute review of my candidate summary within the technology. And so that personalized the conversation so much more for me, because I was able to see that obviously that they had done their homework on me and had really kind of followed me through that conversation. And so the way that you're really using the interview time, that limited time that you have with a candidate, to the max, there's only so much that you can do when you are relying on written, on written notes or on anecdotal storytelling between interviewer to interviewer. If you have data to back up the interview, data to share, teams are just much more effective at creating a more holistic view of a candidate, and the ability to share across teams makes that whole process much more efficient. The other thing that you'll find when we talk about better is that with interview intelligence, you are diving deeper into the areas of interest or concern. So for example, we will see our customers tweak their next interview plan, or add additional questions to their next interview plan because something came up in the previous interview that they wanted to dive into. But they can only really know this with that data being surfaced through AI. Which is critical. Really diving deeper is what allows you to make a better decision. And often it's hard for hiring managers or for interviewers to really see a full candidate story when they're meeting with a lot of candidates. This is not their full-time job. It's incredibly overwhelming to then be able to remember every single candidate and give them a fair shot. The other sort of underlying sort of core value around what better actually means is that with, the goal of allowing a candidate to fully represent themselves is really key. I will also share more of a personal story here as well on this. I felt like I knew I nailed that my first interview, for example. I knew I nailed it. But you never know how someone's going to tell your story again, or how that individual is going to interpret you. And so knowing that my recording was going to be included in the submission of my interview summary was really important to me, because I knew that I would be well represented. And so candidates are looking to be well represented throughout the interview process. They're looking for that personalized experience. They're looking to not have their questions, the same questions repeated over and over again. And they're looking for a more in-depth conversation with their interviewers. And doing that without wasting time is really hard, right? Most people will be like, oh, well, I guess I'll have to do more interviewing. But with the technology that's available today in the market, it doesn't require more interviews. It just requires more intelligence in the interview process. Any comments or questions on that before I get into the next trend? All right, I'm going to dive into the next one. All right, trend 3. We're talking about trend 3. What we're seeing within a remote space for interviewing is the focus on the candidate experience. So as you guys already know, we'll talk about this as with full transparency. We're all focused on candidate experience. We all want candidate experience to be incredible, right? On average, top talent is on the market for less than 10 days. And candidates have optionality. So standing out is a must for us, right? Especially in this remote environment. Now, doing that is critical. We all kind of agree there. The technology that is out there to help us do it better is incredibly innovative today. We talked about sort of that first step of the better interview as the first step in the process. That personalized experience and really kind of creating an experience where they feel like they are actually truly seen is also critical as a second step, by sharing candidate information across your teams and making sure that everyone's well represented. That's crucial. But more importantly, we're talking about like actually learning what the candidate experience is like. So there is now surfacing technology around candidate sentiment, for example, where we can understand candidate sentiment throughout the interview and whether or not it's trending in a positive direction or in a negative direction. And sentiment has been used in AI for a very long time, in particular within sales, and within different other within other areas like sales, marketing. It has rarely been used within the talent space, and so it's exciting to see it start to be used today. To really highlight and understand how your candidates are experiencing your interview process. A lot of this technology is based on on big data that is supported by that has been around for a long time, natural language processing, where we can better understand where the direction in which a candidate's experience is going. So how do teams use this today? They will look at the aggregate. So they will look at, let's say, a batch of interviews. Let's say your engineering team has conducted hundreds-ish interviews, but then we can sort of see where in the conversation the sentiment is trending potentially down. A good example would be, if in, for example, when you're delivering benefits or compensation or delivering your company value proposition, how are your candidates generally reacting to this? And so now you can see this. You can go back and listen to different parts of that interview. And with interview intelligence, you are creating a space where you can easily share coaching to your teams. You can easily review that information and provide that coaching to your team, which is driven by the idea of candidate sentiment. And so with AI, what this is telling us is what is my candidate experience? How can I surface that from my interviews and the interviews that I am collecting? How do I use that information now to coach them so that they are stronger at it? How do I say, okay, how are my teams delivering my brand story? We're moving away, and I'll talk about this again in a minute, but we're moving away from just like, let me train my team to do this one way, and then it's off to the races, like go for it, versus like the opportunity that we have today to really coach and support our teams. I'll pause there, but any initial questions or reactions to that? I'll stop the share so it'll put all of our faces there.
Another version of that question: what are your challenges? What challenges are you seeing in creating a positive candidate experience? And again, don't be so polite. This is the most polite I've seen this group in a year.
Hi, this is Jennifer Steinbrenner. I don't know if I would say that we particularly have a lot of challenges. We were already doing some video interviewing before the pandemic, so we were able to transition pretty easily. So honestly, I think for the most part, our company has adapted it really well. I would just say the only thing that I think is important is that if we are taking time to do video interviews with all of these people, and for whatever reason, if they're not the best qualified candidate and someone else is accepted for the role, I think it's important to send them like a personal email, not just a system generated email, and just thanking them for their time. Yes, they're not getting in a car and getting dressed and driving to the office to interview, but I feel like we have to do things like that to have a little bit more of a personal touch in the process, so that people do feel like their feelings are listened to and they're heard, I guess, because candidate experience is hugely critical at our company. So I think that's what we are trying to do.
Jennifer, can you share a little bit about how you measure candidate experience, like other than obviously with a follow-up, but today, are you doing that already throughout?
We do a lot of polls, like if people will participate, because as you know, not everybody wants to do that, but we do actually have a really high referral rate at our company because we have a really generous referral policy. So probably 30% of our applicants come from referrals. And it's been like that the whole time I've been there. So we definitely hear from the referral candidates. They will they will definitely reach out and let us know what they think about their experience. So we get a lot of feedback from them. And they're the ones, of course, that we have to be really careful with, because unfortunately, I'm sure some of you would share this opinion that a lot of times I think people think that just because they're a referral, then they're going to be a definite shoe-in for a role, and they're not necessarily considering that there's a lot of other great talent out there, and they're not going to be automatically picked just because they're a referral. So the referrals give us great feedback. And then we do, like I said, we do a lot of polling for those people who are selected, and then those who aren't. We constantly ask for feedback. So we're kind of just using all of those measures, I guess, just to try to make sure that we're kind of going above and beyond, because the company I work with is a medium-sized company. It's about 4,500 of us globally, but we don't have a ton of employer recognition, or excuse me, brand recognition, I guess I should say, that we're working on that. So candidate experience is really important to us as well, just so we can try to stand out a little bit in the crowd.
Awesome, thank you. Anybody else using any innovative tools to measure candidate experience? Or any thoughts around the idea of measuring candidate sentiment throughout the interview?
This is Sarah Tice. I like the idea of measuring candidate sentiment along the journey, because you really can find those opportunities to strengthen or streamline and find some of those things. For our organization, maybe not too innovative, but we do a really robust survey for those who are hired. So all of our new hires get a survey, and it's wrapped into kind of their whole new hire experience, so we can kind of get a sense of what their pre-hire and onboarding is. But we do ask some pretty specific questions around their recruitment experience. And then we actually also survey our hiring managers to understand what their experience is working with our recruitment team.
Hi, it's Jennifer again. I would definitely concur with Sarah. We also send out surveys to all of the hiring managers that we work with after each, of the individuals are hired for these roles, or just we do internal client service we call them ICSEs, internal client service evaluations. So we're constantly asking for feedback from the business side, whatever we can do to do a better job. There's lots of open-ended questions, as well as questions that they can, rank, strongly agree, disagree, etc. So yeah, client service is huge at our company, internal and external. So we're always getting surveys for everything.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that. I think what you will see available to you soon, or that is available already to you, is is truly measuring it from the candidate perspective versus post experience, something that's delayed, which will be an interesting kind of direction that teams will go in to be able to surface that kind of information. All right, let me move on to my next trend before I start to run out of time. All right, so the last trend, and thank you both for sharing that. For the last trend, I'm going to talk about interviewer coaching and the impact that current technology is having on interviewer coaching. It's no longer a once a year thing. I'd love for you guys to jump in here and share sort of how you guys do your training and your coaching. But with the trends around interviewing and interview intelligence, what you're seeing is that with AI, you can continuously coach your team. So, for example, I'll use our team as an example, our product as an example, but I don't want to, this isn't me trying to pitch Pillar, just sharing some of the things that you'll see in the market is the ability to see insights around what is happening in your interview. So let's say that your engineering team is no longer following their guides, right? They're seeing some negative trends in their candidate sentiment. And you're seeing, that they're increasing the number of interruptions that you might have within an interview, all that insight will be surfaced for you throughout the interview processes. So now you can say, oh, let me just dig in, listen to some of these interviews, use that data to then send coachable moments to your interviewers, and just share with them like, hey, here's a great example is like, if my colleague Alexa delivers brand value really well, I can, and I do not, I can share a clip with Alexa as a coach, as a TA leader. I can share a clip on Alexa's approach to sharing company brand story with the individuals in my engineering team who might be struggling to deliver the brand value in the story, as well as she might, she's in marketing, she's better at that than maybe I am as an engineer. And so I'm able to coach that throughout the process, so that we are not just learning that later in the journey. And there's an easy way for us to capture that so that our candidates are not quite as impacted. Something that I always speak to is like, I am a chatty Kathy when it comes to interviewing, and it's not the space for me to share who I am. It's a space for someone else to share who they are, right? And so I can track my own talk times within the interview. Am I spending 50% of the time talking? What's a good benchmark for what I would like? My goal is to stay at like my candidate being able to speak 75% of the time, so they can really have the bulk of the time to share who they are. But I didn't know this until I had incorporated these interview intelligence tools into my experience as an interviewer, especially even though I've been interviewing for 20 years, right? This is a direction that you'll see technology support interviewer coaching. And so before I move on, I'd love to get your reactions or your thoughts on some of the ways in which you are actually coaching your interviewers today, and any challenges that you're facing there. I'll use Norm's framing better than mine. Any challenges that you're facing in interviewer coaching?
Got it all figured out, huh?
We have a shy group today. All right, well,
I'll talk if you want. I'll answer. I don't know. I'm like, wow, all these people that I'm recruiting or HR that aren't talking. I'm like, wow, this is unusual, right? We do a lot of interview training in our company because we have an issue where we're concerned. Like, obviously, we do the initial interviewing, and sometimes we're still involved with the process as it goes along, but typically we're not involved in every interview. So we obviously have concerns. Are they interviewing in a capacity that's legal? Are we following the law? Are we being considerate? Are we giving them full attention, while we're in that process with them, and being present during the interview? So we actually have formal training at the company. Like, once you reach manager status, you go through a pretty big interview training. Prior to that, if you're in a lower level at the company, like a consultant or a senior consultant, you can be involved in the interview process, but you cannot interview alone. You have to interview with one of your managers, because the managers have been trained. And I feel like we're constantly evolving as far as the interview process. We sometimes give out tests. Well, I guess I should say like quizzes / tests. Well, definitely during that training period, just to make sure they're understanding what's legal to ask, what's appropriate, and trying to make them we actually put together like interview evaluation questions so that they can use I can't talk today, sorry. Behavioral interviewing questions, so that they can ask about examples, real life examples, and get a good answer, so that it's not going to be based on your gut reaction to how you feel about the candidate. We can use those behavioral based questions to get at the information we need, because we kind of set up a whole library of questions to help them, depending upon the level, the position, the functional area, just to kind of get to the heart of what they need to know. I don't know if that's helpful, but I just wanted to answer since everyone was being quiet.
I appreciate you, Jennifer. I think Chris is jumping in here too and sharing that with his first time hiring managers, he'll go over a checklist of do's and don'ts on interviewing, and make sure that they're comfortable. The goal here with the direction that tech is taking interviewer coaching is to get ahead of it as quickly as possible. So like, we can set up all these established, obviously the one-time established, structures are still in place for most companies. They're still doing, Jennifer, to your point, they're still doing, new first-time hiring manager interview training. They're doing first-time interviewer training. They're still doing all their trainings in that way. But with interview intelligence, you're seeing it happen also throughout the process. So when they start jumping in there, you're not just like, sort of blind to what's actually happening in there, or you don't have to not waste somebody's time, but like allocate a lot of resources to that training experience when you're able to do that with technology that's supporting you to do it better. Bob, I see that you're off mute. Can I call on you? Were you going to share?
Sure. Yeah, I was going to try and bail you out as well. A couple things. In terms of, challenges that we had in some of the remote interviewing, there's some that might not be right in the wheelhouse of what we're talking about, but, we had to deal with both candidates not showing up for meetings. And then secondly, when you have a candidate that appears to really be distracted, like they're Googling every answer or getting coaching from the side, things of that nature. Those were things that we found were much more common than we would have ever imagined. And actually we're able to spot some people that were not true candidates. But in terms of both candidate experience and being able to get more actionable insights, we found one of the things, is making sure candidates are comfortable and having that sort of preparing them as best you can, either prior to that call through your email and your scheduling, whether it's material or links to look at, but then also opening up the interview with an agenda. I'm going to cover a little bit about who I am, then we'll talk about the team, the product, the company, and then we'll drill down on some technical things and then also some situational questions. We found we got tremendously better information. And then secondly, trying to focus those in regards to being open-ended questions where possible, as opposed to close-ended, because you're going to get a lot more information by asking, somebody, tell me what you did with X programming language in terms of the scope of the project in your part versus, do you program in that language? So those are the things that really helped us ensure we were getting the information we needed in the interviews.
I got you, Bob. Thank you for that. I'm seeing in the chat also, Sarah and Jennifer mentioning their inclusive training and unconscious bias training. So what you'll start to see technology be able to do, and you're starting to see it already, is that we can now surface where there is problematic questions or problematic moments within your interview for you to review. So for example, if you are, if your team wants to surface these, you can see if perhaps we're asking inappropriate questions or questions that are, we should not be asking during an interview. And technology will be able to surface that for you, so you can then go ahead and quickly get ahead of it and quickly coach, in particular, new interviewers that might, ask a question. They might be having casual conversation with someone and just start to ask about family planning or something like that during an interview. And so, tech can surface that now for you and allow you to have that available to you, so you can do coaching and prepare your teams better in that way. Really to support this idea around like, hey, you're teaching all this you're teaching how to run an unconscious, how to manage unconscious bias when you interview. You're teaching how to run an inclusive interview, but how does that play out in action? That's what the tech will bridge. It's to make your training ultimately come to life within the interview itself. All right, I'm going to jump into the last portion of our conversation. So let me pull back for a minute and share my slides again. So we're going to talk very quickly about best practices. I'm going to go through 3 and how interview trends and interviewing technology is supporting to advance these 3 things and advance sort of our direction within interviewing. Some of this is going to be stuff you're already doing, and I'll tell you how the technology is helping us do it better. And then some of this is stuff maybe you're not doing. So the first one is creating a structured process. Many of us try to do that with like very strong guides and guided questions and competency planning and competency reviews, but it's not enough anymore to just lay out what should happen in the interview. We have the opportunity now to track whether or not those things are happening and to make it easier for your team to actually do it. So, for example, there's technology out here now where teams have a co-pilot where they can submit their feedback automatically as they interview, and they're guided through the entire interview. And so the guides are coming out right into their interviewing platform. So right into Zoom, right into Teams, right available to them in a Chrome extension, on their phone, etc., so that they are better at following the plan that you had in action. A structured interview process is the foundation of a good interview process, right? It is the starting point of getting all the information that you need for your for selecting a candidate. Again, you guys all know this. Interviewing is not anyone's full-time job, right, outside of ours. And so really having technology that makes it easier for teams is really critical. And so what tech is allowing teams to do is to make that much faster. We have companies that are using, for example, interview co-pilots, so that they can make sure that that teams are, adhering to the expected guides and expected direction, and then tracking that performance afterwards to make sure that they're holding their teams accountable to running those structured interviews and making sure that candidates are getting a consistent experience. And so you'll see that kind of technology also surfacing right now around supporting teams and making sure that they're well guided. What will happen soon is that you'll start to see things like, suggested questions. I know that you're looking at potentially this core competency. You want to ask these questions. That's available today within different platforms that are now able to do during the interview, support you in making sure that you're not missing anything that you might want to review. So starting to think about like, hey, our goal is to run structured interviews. We know that we have, some of us leverage our ATS, some of us leverage a Google Doc, some of us are leveraging, a spreadsheet, whatever it is, or a form that people have to fill out. Whatever it is that you're leveraging today, the technology is getting more upskilled and up-leveled so that your team is actually running these in an effective way. The next thing I'll talk about, the next sort of best practice is one that I want to ask a question before we jump in. My question to all of you is, are any of you recording your interviews already? I'll stop the share. I'm seeing Sarah and Jillian say no, Brenda say no. Anyone in the audience already doing it? No. Any resistance right now? Have you guys anybody discussed it? I have Sarah saying some tech assessments. Yes, we see it there. And then USR 1C4 is saying I've done some in the past.
We've talked about it. I think that one hesitation that we have is, what kind of experience are we going to create for our candidates, right? If candidates have a mental illness, like let's just say anxiety, right? And now you're saying you're going to record an interview. Are you really going to get the best interview from a candidate that's not used to being recorded? Or, what does that look like? We're kind of writing the line on what exactly that would look like and what best practices would be.
Gotcha, Sarah. Anyone else? I appreciate you sharing that.
I'm curious what the experience is for apparently like a Star Wars like drone, USR 1C4, right? You said that you've done some in the past. I'm curious if you can are able to come on audio.
Yeah, I am. It's Sandra with IHG. We've done it. I've done some in the past, and I also will sit in on meetings as well. So I've done a little bit of both, and it actually has been really eye-opening. Every once in a while I have a team and they want to like put 6 people on an interview of one person. So to me, it turns out to be more of an interrogation, which I don't like at all. And we just don't do business like that at IHG. We want to make it a great candidate experience. So I've done a little bit of both. I'm real big on recording my strategy meetings that I have with my hiring managers. But I don't record all of the interviews. It might be a really great idea because if you do it on Teams, it'll come out in transcript as well as the recording itself. So anyways.
Oh, perfect. I appreciate you sharing that a bit. It is what we're seeing happen more and more in the market. Recording our interviews, there is, to your point, Sarah, and I think Jennifer jumped in here too. There are teams that are evaluating this right now, and there's a lot of like potential anxiety or fear around like how will this impact my candidates. What many teams are seeing is that the reactions have been incredibly positive from candidates, and that the value and the impact to their experience and your ability to run a better process is so far outweighs the areas in which you need to mitigate a bit in order to make sure that it's a good experience for everybody as well. To your point around inclusivity, many times what teams are seeing is that they're able to catch more issues around inclusivity because they're able to see the interviews versus if they weren't able to actually see what's going on in the interviews. And so there's a critical balance that teams are weighing right now, which is how do I run a more inclusive process without really knowing what's happening in the process? And how do I know what's happening in the process without isolating some candidates? Candidates have the option to opt out often from recordings, which is totally fine. And we'll see a lot of really positive feedback from candidates after their interviews are completed, where ultimately the entire process is very different when you're thinking about that and doing it, and actually doing it yourself. So what you're seeing right now is that the market is shifting in this direction because of all of the benefits that are coming from doing that. Years ago, there was a time, I'm in sales. So there was a time in sales where we didn't record our sales calls. And people were very afraid of doing that, and really hesitant around doing that. They were like, well, it's like part of how I run a good sales experience is by building a strong relationship. How can I build a strong relationship with a prospect when I'm recording them at the same time, right? And now today, if you ask any salesperson, they'll be like, there's no way that you can take away these recordings from me. They have made me so much better as a partner to my prospects, as a partner to my organization. And prospects love it and appreciate the way that I can keep track of what's going on in our conversations and support them. And people get onto these recorded calls and they forget that they're being recorded after 3 minutes of engaging with somebody. And so I like to use that use case as a sort of interesting kind of historical perspective on the impact that recording has had in the past on different areas of our business and the impact that it will have in the way that we think about interviewing as well. And many of the things that I've already shared are driven by the ability to do this as well. So I'm excited to see how teams start to evolve and think about how do we leverage this, because we know that there's a lot of value to it, but do it our way, do it with our considerations in mind, protect our candidates and make sure that we're protecting our candidates in the way that we feel like is best, and ensuring that they're still getting a great experience through that. All right, so let me jump into the last best practice, and then we'll wrap up today. So the last thing I want to make sure that I'm sharing is the way in which technology is supporting you in collecting feedback faster. So we all know that collecting feedback quickly is essential to run a streamlined process, get your candidates through the process faster. And I can't tell you how many times I hear from teams, I am tired of chasing feedback from my interview team. Not only is it annoying to chase feedback and it takes time and it slows down your process, but there are two big impacts that this has. One is that it compromises the integrity of the information that we're collecting from our candidates and from our interview experience, interview journey. This is to my point earlier that I shared around like, hey, none of my clients knew why a candidate was being rejected, or the information they were giving me was very limited. So what does that mean for you is that there's also the second part of this, which is, if I'm having trouble collecting feedback from my interviewer, is that feedback even being used to make a decision on a candidate, right? Like, how is it that we're actually using this data to inform a better decision when we are in the middle of a hire? What ends up happening is that we still make decisions based on our gut feeling, and we still struggle with that. What interview intelligence is doing and the trends that we're seeing in technology that's supporting the interview process is that we're collecting that feedback in real time. That feedback is being collected as you interview. So there's no more chasing of interview feedback. There's no more sort of stress around that. That is all collected in real time in that conversation and submitted automatically back into your ATS, so you don't have to stress about chasing it. The other thing that technology is allowing for you to do is to link the feedback that's collected. So like, let's say I score a candidate a 4 on a 5, let's say on a 4 on a 5 scale for a particular skill set. If that is out of line with the rest of the way in which other interviewers have evaluated that candidate, now teams are going back and listening to what that interviewer heard so that they can calibrate better as a team. You know, I often have my CEO be like, I don't think that this was really a 4, Edisa. You know, here's my feedback for you on this. And then I can take that feedback, and it has made me a much better interviewer throughout the time that I have been at Pillar. So another sort of tool and technology or area of your interview process where technology is going to really streamline things for you and make them easier as you go forward. All right. That's all that I wanted to cover today. I thank you so much for having me. I know that like we had a relatively quiet crowd today. It's okay. I understand it. I'm married to an introvert. It's fine. But please know that we are here to answer any of your questions. If you have them, you can feel free to like reach out to me directly. I'm Edisa@pillar.hr for any questions. If you want to explore this type of technology a little bit further or experiment, you can definitely hit me up. And I'll make myself fully available to you. We'll have a webinar next week as a team as well if you want to join us there. So a lot coming from Pillar in particular. So thank you again for the opportunity to spend an afternoon with you, to have my coffee with you. It was awesome to be here.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Edisa. Yeah, this was really informative. I threw the website address in the chat. I threw your email in the chat, and there'll be a follow-up. So, you know, you guys will all have the information in your email shortly. So awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And any final thoughts, questions before we go? All right. Awesome. Well, we'll see you again next week, or maybe not next week. Check the schedule. We'll see you again shortly. I'm on vacation. I don't know when. I just go when my wife tells me to go. So I'll see you soon. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.